الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. وصلنا إلى قول المؤلف رحمه الله: أو طار إلى حلقه ذباب أو غبار، صفحة 90 و300، أليس كذلك؟ قال: أو طار إلى حلقه ذباب أو غبار. قال الشيخ: أي فلا يفطر لأنه بغير قصد، لكن لو طار إلى أقصى الفم فإنه يمكنه أن يخرجه، إنما لو ذهب إلى الحلق فلا يمكن أن يخرجه، وربما لو حاول إخراجه تقيأ، لذلك يعفى عنه. وكذلك إذا طار إلى حلقه غبار فإنه لا يفطر لعدم القصد. وهذا باتفاق أهل العلم. ولا يقال للعامل الذي يعمل في التراب: لا تعمل وأنت صائم، لأنك لو عملت وأنت صائم لطار إلى حلقك غبار، لأننا نقول إن طيران الغبار إلى حلقه ليس بمقصود. لكن أفلا يقال ما دام هذا العمل سببا لإفطاره لا يجوز أن يعمل؟ الجواب: ليس هذا سببا لإفطاره، لأنه إذا طار إلى حلقه غبار بلا قصد فإنه لا يفطر. So Al-Hajjawi says, or a fly flies to his throat, or dust, or a fly flies to his throat, or dust. The Sheikh says, meaning it breaks the fast or it doesn't break the fast if a fly flies his throat or dust. That it doesn't break the fast. Why? Because it's unintentional. And so if it goes into his back of his mouth and he's able to take it out, that's different. But if it goes into his throat and he can't take it out, and perhaps if he tries to take it out he throws up, then that's forgiven. Similarly, if he gets dust or dirt flies into his mouth, then does he break his fast? No. Why? Unintentional. He says, and it is not said to the worker who works in these things, someone's working among dust or dirt, don't work while you are fasting, because if you are working while you are fasting, then that's going to fly into your mouth. It's because he doesn't intend it. It's because he doesn't intend that. Someone may reply and say, well, because it's a cause for him to break his fast, shouldn't we say that it's not permissible for him to work? He says the answer is that it's not a cause for him to break his fast. If that happens unintentionally, does that break his fast? It doesn't break his fast. And so, if that happens, then his fast isn't broken. قال رحمه الله: أو فكر فأنزل، أو احتلم، أو أصبح في فيه طعام فلفظه. قال الشيخ: قوله لو فكر فأنزل، أي فكر في الجماع فأنزل. وين؟ قال: أي فكر في الجماع فأنزل، سواء كان ذا زوجة ففكر في جماع زوجته، أو لم يكن ذا زوجة ففكر في الجماع مطلقا فأنزل، فإنه لا يفسد صومه بذلك. ودليله، وهذا مرة معنا، قال: ودليله قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن الله تجاوز لأمتي ما حدثت به أنفسها ما لم تعمل أو تتكلم، وهذا لم يعمل ولم يتكلم، إنما حدث نفسه وفكر فأنزل. وعلم من كلامه فكر فأنزل أنه لو حصل منه عمل فإنه يفطر، بأن تدلك بالأرض حتى أنزل، أو حرك ذكره حتى أنزل، أو قبل زوجته حتى أنزل، أو ما أشبه ذلك، فإنه يفطر. The Sheikh says, قوله, his statement, أو فكر فأنزل, or he thinks and thus ejaculates. And this did we mention this one? Thinking? Yeah, we did. He said, meaning he thinks about intercourse and he ejaculates, regardless of whether he has a wife or not, then his fasting is not corrupted. His fasting is not corrupted. Who remembers the evidence? He said the evidence is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. Allah has overlooked for my ummah that which their thoughts within themselves, as long as they don't act or speak. And this person, did he act? No, but it was just thoughts. It was just thoughts. And so you understand then from the words of the author is that if he does act, he does do something which leads to it, then is his fast corrupted? Yes, it is corrupted. For example, he touches his part, or he's touching his wife and kissing his wife, and then in that case his fast is corrupted. قوله أو احتلم أي فلا يفطر حتى لو نام على تفكير واحتلم في أثناء النوم لأن النائم غير قاصد. وهذا ذكرنا أنه بالإجماع، هذا بالإجماع. وقد قال لأن النائم غير قاصد وقد رفع عنه القلم. وأحيانا يستيقظ الإنسان حينما يتحرك الماء الدافق، فهل يلزمه في هذه الحال أن يمسكه؟ الجواب لا، لأنه انتقل من محله ولا يمكن رده، لأن حبسه بالضغط على الذكر مضر، كما لو تحركت معدته ليتقيأ فإنه لا يلزمه أن يحبسها لما في ذلك من الضرر. His statement احتلم, what was that? Wet dream, or has wet dream, meaning breaks the fast or doesn't break the fast? Doesn't break the fast, even if he sleeps while thinking about that and has a wet dream during his sleep. Why? Because the sleeping person can't have an intention. He has no intention, and the pen has been lifted from him. And we mentioned this is there any khilaf in this? We mentioned that this is a ijma'. This is a consensus, that the wet dream does not break the fast. He says sometimes someone may wake up after that ejaculate starts moving from its place. Does he, in that case, have to try to withhold it? He says the answer, no, because as soon as it starts to move from its place, then it can't be returned. And also, if he tries to withhold it with his hand by squeezing his part, then that may harm him. And similarly, if his stomach starts to move and he's about to throw up, he's not required to withhold it. He's not required to withhold it. قال رحمه الله قوله أو أصبح في فيه طعام فلفظه أي لا يفسد صومه لأنه لم يبتلع طعاما بعد طلوع الفجر. ويتصور ذلك إذا كان الإنسان مثلا يأكل تمرا وصار في أقصى فمه شيء من التمر ولم يحس به إلا بعد طلوع الفجر، ففي هذه الحال يلفظه وصومه صحيح ولا بأس. ويتصور أيضا بأن يكون الصائم نائما فيجعل أحد ولده مثلا يجعل في فمه طعاما أو شرابا، فإذا انتبه وكان في فمه وجب عليه أن يلفظه، وإذا انتبه ثم ابتلعه فصومه فسد، وإن ابتلعه بغير قصد فصومه صحيح. إن ابتلعه بقصد فصومه قد فسد، وإن ابتلعه بغير قصد فصومه صحيح. He says his statement أو أصبح في فيه طعام فلفظه, meaning a what? It does not break the fast, or it does? It does not break the fast. He says, meaning it does not break the fast. Because he's mentioning things that what? Don't break the fast. Right now he's mentioning things that don't break the fast. He says, meaning it doesn't break the fast because he didn't swallow the food after Fajr. And he says this could be imagined. You can imagine this if someone, for example, was eating dates and it's in the back of his mouth and he doesn't realize it until after Fajr. And so in this case, he spits it out and his fasting is correct. His fasting is correct. And you can also imagine it if someone put food or drink in the person's mouth, such as a child. The person is sleeping and the child puts food or drink in their mouth. And so if he wakes up and it's in his mouth, then it's an obligation on him to spit it out. And if he swallows it unintentionally, it's in his mouth and he had swallowed it unintentionally, then his fasting is correct. And if he wakes up and it's in his mouth and he swallows it intentionally, his fasting is corrupted. ومن المسائل التي يذكرها الفقهاء كذلك ما لو ابتلع الصائم ما يكون بين أسنانه أو يعلق بالأسنان من الطعام كالتمر أو اللحم أو الخبز ونحو ذلك. فإن كان لا يمكن التحرز منه، أي يشق التحرز منه، لا يمكن أن يلفظه وجرى مع ريقه فابتلعه فصومه صحيح. صومه صحيح. وإن كان يمكنه لفظه فصومه فاسد. إذا كان يمكنه لفظه فابتلعه فقد فسد صومه. One of the issues that the fuqaha also mention as it relates to this is that if someone has food between their teeth or stuck to their teeth, bread, meat, or whatever may get stuck to the teeth or between the teeth while they're fasting, the fasting person, tamar, meat, or whatever. And so, if it's difficult to avoid it, and he can't really spit it out, and it happens to go down with his saliva, then his fasting is sahih. His fasting is valid in this case. If he's not able to avoid it, he's not able to spit it out, but it does go down with his saliva, his fasting is still correct. But if he is able to take it out, then, and he leaves it, and he swallows it, then his fasting is corrupted in this case. In that case, his fasting is corrupted. قال رحمه الله قوله أو اغتسل أي اغتسل فدخل الماء إلى حلقه فإنه لا يفطر بذلك لعدم القصد. Or makes ghusl. If he makes ghusl and he swallows water accidentally, does it break the fast or not? Why? Because it's unintentional. قال أو تمضمض أي فدخل الماء إلى حلقه حتى وصل إلى معدته فإنه لا يفطر لعدم القصد. وهذا سواء تمضمض لطهارة واجبة أو طهارة مستحبة أو تمضمض من أجل أن يبل فمه. قال فإنه لا يفطر لعدم القصد. Or مضمضة. And so he's doing madmada and he accidentally swallows water while fasting. What is the ruling? Doesn't break the fast because it was unintentional. And this is regardless if he does the madmada for a tahara which is wajib, or a tahara which is mustahab, or he just does madmada in order to wet his mouth. So if he swallows it unintentionally in these cases, then his fasting is valid. His fasting is valid. He doesn't break his fast. قال أو استنثر. قوله أو استنثر والمراد استنشق لأن الاستنثار يخرج الماء من الأنف. فإما أن يكون هذا من المؤلف سبقة قلم أو سهوا أو أراد الاستنثار بعد الاستنشاق، ولكن حتى لو أراد هذا لم يستقم، لأن الاستنثار إخراج ما في الأنف لا إدخال شيء إليه. فإذا استنشق الماء في الوضوء مثلا ثم نزل الماء إلى حلقه فإنه لا يفطر لعدم القصد. Or استنثر. What's الاستنثار? استنثر when you do الوضوء استنثر. الاستنثار is to expel the water out of your nose. Istinshaq is to take it into your nose. So why did the author say istanthara? Can you break your fast by expelling it? He said istanthara, and what's intended is istinshaq. That's what's intended. Because istinthar, the Shaykh is saying, is to expel the water from your nose. And so he says either this is a slip of the pen from the author, or he forgot, he made a mistake, or he intended the istinthar after doing istinshaq. He said, but even in this case, the meaning is incorrect, because al-istinthar is to take water out of your nose. So here, what's intended is istinshaq. So you can put a note there that's istinshaq. So the point, if someone does al-istinshaq in wudu, takes water into their nose, and it accidentally goes down to their throat and goes down, do they break their fasting? They don't break their fasting. Why? Unintentional. Of course, there's differing in some of the things we mentioned, but we're not going to talk about it. قال قوله أو زاد على الثلاث أي في المضمضة أو الاستنشاق فدخل الماء إلى حلقه فإنه لا يفسد صومه. وأتى المؤلف بقوله زاد على الثلاث لأن ما قبل الثلاث والثلاث كذلك، لأن ما قبل الثلاث والثلاث في المضمضة والاستنشاق مشروع ومأذون فيه. والقاعدة عند العلماء أن ما ترتب على المأذون فليس بمضمون، أن ما ترتب على المأذون فليس بمضمون، أي ما ترتب على ما أذن به الشرع فليس بمضمون. ما كان أثر شيء مأذون به شرعا فهو غير مضمون. مثاله لو أن شخصا حكم عليه بقطع اليد لسرقته، حكم عليه بقطع اليد فقطعت يده من غير تعد، قطعت يده ثم مرض بسبب القطع فمات، هل لوليه أن يطالب؟ ليس له أن يطالب. لماذا؟ لأن هذا ترتب على شيء مأذون به شرعا، وما ترتب على المأذون فليس بمضمون. قال فإذا تمضمض في الأولى والثانية والثالثة فوصل الماء إلى حلقه فإنه لا يفطر بذلك، لأنه لم يفعل إلا شيئا مشروعا، وهذا ترتب على شيء مشروع فلا يضر. وأما الزيادة على الثلاث فهي غير مشروعة، وكذلك المبالغة في الاستنشاق للصائم، المبالغة في الاستنشاق للصائم مشروعة أو غير مشروعة؟ غير مشروعة. قال الشيخ رحمه الله والزيادة على الثلاث في الوضوء إما محرمة وإما مكروهة كراهة شديدة، لقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من زاد على ذلك فقد أساء وتعدى وظلم. فأدنى أحوالها أنها مكروهة. فأدنى أحوالها أنها مكروهة. فإذا زاد على الثلاث ووصل الماء إلى حلقه فإنه لا يفطر لعدم القصد، لأنك لو سألت هذا الذي تمضمض أكثر من ثلاث أتريد أن يصل الماء إلى حلقك؟ لقال لا. وقوله أو بالغ فدخل الماء حلقه لم يفسد، أو بالغ فدخل الماء حلقه لم يفسد، المبالغة في الاستنشاق غير مشروعة للصائم. قال أي لو بالغ في الاستنشاق أو المضمضة مع أنه مكروه للصائم أن يبالغ فيهما ودخل الماء حلقه فإنه لا يفطر بذلك لعدم القصد. Now he says قوله أو زاد على الثلاث. You guys see it? Or he does more than three. Or he does more than three. Pay attention on this. Meaning in al-madmada or al-istinshaq. And thus, he does it more than three, the fourth time, the fifth time, and so the water goes into his throat. The Shaykh is saying his fasting is not corrupted. That's what the author intends, that his fasting is not corrupted. Why did why did he say or does it more than three? Why didn't he just suffice and say istinshaq then to madmada? He says, because the first and second and third time is in madmada or istinshaq, when you make wudu. Is that permissible shar'an? Is it permissible shar'an to do it once or twice or three times? Now, or let's continue with that. And the principle with the ulama is that if something happens as a result of doing something which is permissible, then it has no ruling. It has no ruling. And so if someone does it madmada or istinshaq one time and accidentally swallows the water, excused? Because he did something permissible. Two times, permissible. On the third time, permissible. Why? Because he did something permissible. And this is a principle in the Sharia. That which results that which is a result of something which is permissible shar'an has no ruling. So, for example, the ruling of cutting off his hand is established against him because he stole. And the conditions are fulfilled and his hand is cut off. Without any transgression. His hand is cut off and he happens to get sick as a result and die. Can the wali of the dead person seek the right for the blood of this dead person? Because it was a result of something which happened, shar'an, which is permissible. Now let's say two people got into a fight and one of them transgresses against the other and cuts off his hand, and because his hand was cut off, he died as a result. Is he responsible for the death? Yes, he is now. Why? Because what he did was not permissible shar'an. Understood? So, now, doing the madmada or istinshaq more than three times, is it permissible shar'an? It's prohibited. Shar'an, it's prohibited. Similarly, is it shar'an permissible to exaggerate your madmada and istinshaq? Why not? How do we know? The Messenger ﷺ said, exaggerate your istinshaq unless you are. Why? Because it could go down. So, al-madmada and istinshaq, it's prohibited to exaggerate it when you are fasting. The Shaykh says, and doing it more than three times in wudu is either haram or makruh. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, after showing al-wudu, he said, and whoever does more than this, فَقَدْ أَسَاءَ وَتَعَدَّى وَظَلَمَ. He has done wrong, and he has transgressed, and he has oppressed. So you can't do more than 3 in wudu. You don't have permission, shar'an, to do more than 3. Wash your hand 3, do more madmada more than 3 times, istinshaq more than 3 times, your feet more than 3 times, and so on. He says the least we can say is that it is makruh to do so. The Shaykh says this is either haram or makruh to do so, to do it more than 3 times. And so, if he does something now, he does it more than 3 times, al-madmada or istinshaq, more than 3. The Shaykh is saying he does not break his fast because it was unintentional. Because if you were to ask him, did you do that intentionally? He'd say, no, I didn't intend for the water to reach my throat, for me to swallow this water. The Shaykh says, and his statement, or exaggerating madmada or istinshaq, does he have permission to do that shar'an? No. He says if he exaggerates the madmada or istinshaq, even though it's makruh for a fasting person to exaggerate those 2, then the water reaches his throat, then he does not break his fast due to the lack of intention. That's what the Shaykh is saying. فالحجاوي رحمه الله نبه بهذا على مسألة سبق الماء إلى الحلق بسبب غير مشروع لأنه لا تشرع الزيادة على 3 في المضمضة والاستنشاق ولا تشرع المبالغة في المضمضة والاستنشاق للصائم. لكن لو ارتكب النهي وفعل، هل يفسد صومه أم لا؟ هل يفسد صومه؟ مذهب الحنابلة، وهو الذي اختاره الشيخ ابن عثيمين رحمه الله، أن صومه لا يفسد. مذهب الحنابلة، وهو الذي اختاره الشيخ، أن صومه لا يفسد، لأنه وإن فعل شيئا مكروها وغير مأذون به شرعا فإن وصول الماء إلى جوفه غير مقصود. غير مقصود. ومن شروط فساد الصوم أن يكون العمل عمدا، أن يكون عن عمد. قال الجمهور يفسد صومه في هذه الحال، لأن وصول الماء إلى حلقه ترتب على شيء غير مأذون به شرعا. لأن وصول الماء هنا ترتب على شيء غير مأذون به شرعا، على شيء منهي شرعا، على شيء منهي عنه شرعا. نعم. So Al-Hajjawi rahimahullah in these 2 issues is pointing out a mas'ala, and that is, if someone accidentally swallows water due to doing something which is impermissible, because doing more than 3 is prohibited shar'an. The exaggeration in istinshaq and madmada is prohibited shar'an. So if he does the prohibition and accidentally takes in water now, is his fasting corrupted or not? The Hanabila, so that's why Al-Hajjawi said that. Al-Hanabila, the madhab of the Hanabila, and the choice of Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen is that his fasting is what? Is not corrupted. Because even though he did something which is makruh, yes, he did something which is makruh, but him swallowing the water was unintentional. The Jumhur said his fasting is corrupted in this case because swallowing the water was a result of doing something which was prohibited, and he's not excused. We can't excuse him here because he did something which is prohibited, and so that which results is a result of that prohibited action. he can't be excused for it. His fasting is corrupted. Now you know why the Shaykh mentioned, now you know why the Shaykh Al-Hajjawi rahimahullah said أَوْزَادَ عَلَى الثَّلَاثِ. He's referring to something specific. Yeah. قال الشيخ رحمه الله تنبيه. ذكر المؤلف رحمه الله 6 مسائل علق الحكم فيها بوصول الماء إلى حلق الصائم، فجعل مناط الحكم وصول الماء إلى الحلق لا إلى المعدة. وظاهر كلام شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية أن مناط الحكم وصول المفطر إلى المعدة، ولا شك أن هذا هو المقصود، إذ لم يرد في الكتاب والسنة أن مناط الحكم هو الوصول إلى الحلق. لكن الفقهاء رحمهم الله قالوا إن وصوله إلى الحلق مظنة وصوله إلى المعدة، أو إن مناط الحكم وصول المفطر إلى شيء مجوف والحلق مجوف، وهذا سبق. He says, تنبيه, the author rahimahullah mentioned 6 issues, and he attached the ruling to the water reaching the throat, to reaching the throat. And so he made the ruling attached to the water reaching the throat, not reaching the stomach. He says, and the apparent, what is taken from the words of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah is that the ruling is attached to the mufattal reaching the stomach, not reaching the throat. He said, and no doubt this is what is intended, because it's not mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah that the ruling is attached to something reaching the throat. So why did the fuqaha say, well, if it reaches the throat, it breaks the fast? They said that they attached the ruling to it reaching the throat is because it's likely, once it reaches the throat, that it goes down to the stomach. It's highly likely that once something gets to the throat, it's difficult to expel it, to repel it, and it reaches the stomach. Or, as we had mentioned in a previous lesson, that remember when we said that the Jumhur say that the reason why the fast is broken is because something reaches a body cavity, and then so they said, well, the throat is a body cavity. على كل حال قال مسألة لو يبس فمه كما يوجد في أيام الصيف ومع بعض الناس بحيث يكون ريقه قليلا ينشف فمه فيتمضمض من أجل أن يبتل فمه أو تغرغر بالماء ونزل إلى بطنه فلا يفطر بذلك لأنه غير مقصود إذ لم يقصد الإنسان أن ينزل الماء إلى بطنه وإنما أراد أن يبل فمه ونزل الماء بغير قصد. مسألة, if someone's mouth goes dry, and we actually a little bit we mentioned that, if someone's mouth goes dry especially in the summer days, and so he does al-madmada in order to wet his mouth, or he gargles water in his mouth, and it goes down by accident. The Shaykh says he does not break his fast because it's unintentional. It's unintentional. Because the person didn't intend that the water goes down to his stomach, and he only intended to wet his mouth, and the water went down without intention. Now, so as it relates to doing al-madmada, is that permissible or not? Is it permissible to do a madmada outside of a tahara for salah, just to wet your mouth while you're fasting? Is it permissible? And so, if he swallows by accident, then we should say that his fasting is not corrupted. Now, al-gharghara, gargling the water in your mouth, should he do that while he's fasting? He shouldn't. But if it does happen, if he does gargle it, and it goes down, What should we say in that case? Then we apply what we mentioned previously. We apply what we mentioned previously when we talked about someone exaggerating the madmada and istinshaq. Because gargling it is much more likely for it to go down than it is exaggerating your madmada. على كل حال, the Shaykh rahimahullah, in all of these cases he says it doesn't break the fast, and there's these differing as we have mentioned. قال رحمه الله: ويتفرع على هذا هل يجوز للصائم أن يستعمل الفرشة والمعجون أو لا؟ الجواب يجوز، لكن الأولى ألا يستعملهما لما في المعجون من قوة النفوذ والنزول إلى الحلق، وبدلا من أن يفعل ذلك في النهار يفعله في الليل، أو يستعمل الفرشة بدون المعجون. ولهذا إذا كان من عادة الإنسان أنه إذا استعمل المعجون وصل المعجون إلى حلقه ووصل الماء إلى حلقه، فنقول له لا تستعمله وأنت صائم، لا تعرض صومك لما يفسده. ولهذا نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن المبالغة في الاستنشاق للصائم، لأنه سبب قوي في وصول الماء إلى الحلق. وكذلك إذا عرف الإنسان أن من عادته أن يصل المعجون إلى حلقه، فنقول له لا تفعل وأنت صائم. Now, an issue related to this as well, using toothpaste and toothbrush while you are fasting. A lot of people ask about that. He says the answer, is that permissible? He says the answer, permissible. But it's more befitting that he doesn't use it. It's more befitting that he doesn't use it because these things easily reach the throat. And instead of doing it during the day, he should do it at night. Or use the toothbrush without toothpaste. And so if someone knows, it's their habit, if they brush their teeth, that the toothpaste reaches their throat, the water in toothpaste reaches their throat, what do we tell them in that case? Don't do it. Don't do it. If you know that that's what happens to you when you brush your teeth, don't do it. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ forbade, as is in the hadith of Laqit, forbade him from exaggerating al-istinshaq, because it's a reason for it to reach the throat. So, in this case, if it's a reason for it to reach your throat, then strong reason for it to reach your throat, then don't do it while you are fasting. قال الحجاوي: ومن أكل شاكا في طلوع الفجر صح صومه. ومن أكل شاكا في طلوع الفجر صح صومه. قال الشيخ: قوله ومن أكل شاكا في طلوع الفجر صح صومه، أي من أتى مفطرا وهو شاك في طلوع الفجر فصومه صحيح، لأن الله سبحانه وتعالى قال: فالآن باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر. وضد التبين الشك والظن، فما دمنا لم يتبين الفجر لنا فلنا أن نأكل ونشرب، لقوله تعالى: ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا واخطأنا وهذا من الخطأ. نعم، فالتبين هو التحقق، فإذا تحقق للصائم طلوع الفجر حرم الأكل والشرب، وإذا لم يتحقق له طلوع الفجر فلا إثم عليه أن يأكل أو يشرب أو نحو ذلك. وأيضا قال صح صومه لأن الأصل بقاء الليل حتى يتبين له خروجه، فالآكل والشارب في هذه الصورة بان على الأصل، بان على الأصل وهو بقاء الليل فلا يمكن أن نفسد صومه. Now he says, whoever eats, pay attention in these because it's going to get a little bit confusing. He says, and whoever eats and doubts whether Fajr has taken place, whether Fajr has risen or not, then his fasting is correct. His fasting is correct. Meaning he's not sure. He's hesitant. Is it Fajr time now or not? And he eats and drinks, his fasting is correct. The Shaykh says, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, translation of the meaning, فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. And eat and drink until the white thread becomes distinct and clear to you from the black thread. And becoming this, at-tabayyun here is a tahaqquq, to establish it, to verify whether this is the case or not. And so if you have established that Fajr time has taken place, then it's haram to eat and drink. And as long as you haven't established that it's Fajr time, you haven't verified that it's Fajr time, then you can still eat and drink. You can eat and drink until you have established it. Also, why is the fasting correct? Because this person is only basing it on what the situation that is present, and that is that it is nighttime. The basis is that it is still nighttime. The basis is that it's still nighttime. He's treating it as if it's still nighttime. Now, is that just having shak? Is that enough for the ruling to go from now it's nighttime to now it's daytime? Is that shak enough? It's not enough. So we stay on the basis. And the basis is that it is still nighttime. That nighttime is still ongoing. And so the one who's eating and drinking, in this case, he's only basing it off of that basis, and that is that it is still nighttime. Nighttime is continuing, and so we cannot say his fasting is corrupted just because of shak. Just because of shak. It's not strong enough for us to say your fasting now is corrupted. He says, and because of the hadith of Asma bint Abi Bakr رضي الله عنهما أو قال رحمه الله ولحديث أسماء بنت أبي بكر رضي الله عنهما حيث أكلوا يظنون غروب الشمس ثم طلعت وإذا كان هذا في آخر النهار فأوله من باب أولى لأن أوله مأذون له في الأكل والشرب حتى يتبين له الفجر. And also because of the hadith of Asma bint Abi Bakr, where they thought that the sun had set, and so they broke their fast. And so if this is at the end of, he's saying if this is at the end of the day, then the beginning is even more so. Because in the beginning, it's permissible for you to eat and drink until you verify that it is Fajr time. You're allowed to eat and drink until you verify that it's Fajr time. So if you're thinking like, oh, I'm not sure, is it Fajr or not Fajr? Are you allowed to eat or drink? Yes. You're hesitant? Yes. That's what Ibn Abbas said. كُلْ مَا شَكَكْتَ حَتَّى لَمْ تَشُكْ. That's what Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma said. Eat as long as you have doubt until you have no doubt. Eat as long as you have doubt until you have no doubt. قال وهذه المسألة لها 5 أقسام. أن يتيقن أن الفجر لم يطلع، مثل أن يكون طلوع الفجر في الساعة 5 ويكون أكله وشربه في الساعة 4 والنصف في الساعة 4:15 فصومه صحيح، هذا واضح. الثانية أن يتيقن أن الفجر طلع، كأن يأكل في المثال السابق في الساعة 5:15 فهذا صومه فاسد، وهذا واضح أيضا. الثالثة قال أن يأكل وهو شاك هل طلع الفجر أو لا، ويغلب على ظنه أنه لم يطلع فصومه صحيح. الرابعة أن يأكل ويشرب ويغلب على ظنه أن الفجر طالع، ويغلب على ظنه أن الفجر طالع فصومه صحيح أيضا، فصومه صحيح أيضا. الخامسة أن يأكل ويشرب مع التردد الذي ليس فيه رجحان فصومه صحيح، وهذا هو الشك الذي أشرنا إليه. قال كل هذا يؤخذ من قوله تعالى وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر. طيب، أما الصورة الرابعة التي ذكرها الشيخ رحمه الله، وهي أن يغلب على ظنه أن الفجر طلع، أن يغلب على ظنه أن الفجر طلع، فالصحيح أنه لا يجوز له أن يأكل ويشرب في هذه الحال، لا يجوز له أن يأكل ويشرب في هذه الحال، بل يجب عليه الإمساك، يجب عليه الإمساك، لأن العمل بغلبة الظن معتبر شرعا ومعمول به بخلاف الشك، والعمل بغلبة الظن يقوم مقام اليقين فيما لا يحصى من المسائل الفقهية. العمل بغلبة الظن يقوم مقام اليقين عند تعذر اليقين فيما لا يحصى من المسائل الفقهية. ولهذا لو كان بين الشخص، بين الصائم وبين الأفق حاجز يمنعه من رؤية الخيط الأبيض، يجب عليه في هذه الحال أن يعمل بغلبة الظن، يتعين عليه أن يعمل بغلبة الظن لتعذر حصول اليقين. وكذلك لو كان في السماء غيم ولا يرى الخيط الأبيض، لا يميز بين الخيط الأبيض والخيط الأسود، فإنه يجب عليه هنا أن يعمل بغلبة الظن لتعذر اليقين. ولهذا من شك في دخول وقت الصلاة فليس له أن يصلي، من شك في دخول وقت الصلاة فليس له أن يصلي حتى يغلب على ظنه أن وقت الصلاة قد دخل أو يتيقن، حتى يغلب على ظنه أو يتيقن. فأوقات الصلاة تثبت إما باليقين وإما بغلبة الظن. فالصحيح أنه إذا غلب على ظنه أن الفجر قد طلع وجب عليه الإمساك، وهذا عمل أكثر الناس اليوم، عملهم بغلبة الظن. وإذا جاز له أن يصلي، يعني لا يمكن أن نقول له يجوز لك أن تصلي صلاة الفجر الآن بناء على غلبة الظن، ولكن لا يجب عليك الإمساك، بل إذا دخل وقت الصلاة سواء بغلبة الظن أو باليقين فإنه يجب عليه أن يمسك. He says, and so this issue has 5 cases regarding Fajr, thinking that Fajr time has been taken place, established or not. Now, the first case is that he's sure that Fajr time has not entered yet. He's certain that Fajr time has not entered. For example, Fajr is at 5 and he's eating and drinking at 4:30. Is this fasting correct? It's correct and that's clear. That's clear. The second case is that he's sure that Fajr time has taken place. He's sure. Yaqeen. And he eats and drinks, in the previous example, for example, at 5:30. Fajr is at 5, he's eating and drinking at 5:30. Ruling on his fasting. Corrupted, and that's clear. His fasting is incorrect, and that's clear. The third case is to eat and drink. However, he has overwhelming suspicion that it is not Fajr time. What do we say in this case? It's not corrupted. It's not corrupted. He has overwhelming suspicion that it's not Fajr time. His fasting is correct. Fasting correct. The fourth case is that he eats and drinks and he has overwhelming suspicion that it is Fajr time. The Shaykh says his fasting is correct. The Shaykh says his fasting is correct. Why did the Shaykh say that? Because it's not at the level of yaqeen yet. So that's the fourth case. He has overwhelming suspicion that it is Fajr time and he eats and drinks. The Shaykh is saying his fasting is correct. The fifth case is that he eats and drinks while he's back and forth. He's hesitant. Like you say 50-50. Is that, it's Fajr, not Fajr? In this case, allowed to eat and drink or not? It's allowed and his fasting is correct. Now, we're not saying should he eat and drink in that case. You should eat and drink is encouraged. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about whether the fasting is correct or not. He says, so the Shaykh says, and all of this is taken from the statement of Allah, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمْ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنْ الْفَجْرِ. Now this fourth case that the Shaykh mentioned, and that is what? That is what? تفضل. The fourth case is that he has an overwhelming feeling, overwhelming suspicion. He's overwhelmingly assuming that it is Fajr time. But it's not at the level of yaqeen, meaning he's not 100%, but he has overwhelming suspicion. The Shaykh says in this case that the fasting is correct. The correct position is that fasting in this case, it's an obligation to withhold in this case. It's an obligation to withhold in this case. And I don't know if anyone preceded the Shaykh to this. I tried to look quickly before the dars in some books of fiqh, and I couldn't find who said that. That if you have overwhelming suspicion that it's Fajr time, you're not supposed to withhold. The point is that what is correct regarding this fourth case, and that is that if you have overwhelming feeling that it is Fajr time, then it's an obligation to withhold, because acting by these overwhelming suspicions is recognized shar'an, and it applies to an innumerable amount of cases shar'an. Because you can't in every single action be 100% sure. You can't be 100% sure. And so, غَلَبَةُ الظَّنِّ is something that is considered shar'an when you cannot establish yaqeen. When you cannot establish yaqeen. As opposed to shak. Shak, you don't act by shak. And like I said, there's innumerable amount of cases. For example, if someone has to make ghusl. Now, in ghusl, is it an obligation to encompass the whole body with water? Yes. If someone is pouring this water on their head, is it possible that there's a tiny portion of skin that water didn't reach on his back? Is it possible? So can he reach yaqeen in this case? It's very difficult. And so you have to go by ghalabat dhann. There's just one example. There's an innumerable amount of examples where when yaqeen can be established, then you go to غلبة الظن, overwhelming suspicion. And then the ruling is established through overwhelming suspicion. Now, for example, if someone had a barrier between him and the horizon, a mountain, buildings, whatever, and he can't see the horizon, so he can distinguish the khayt al-abyad from al-khayt al-aswad. He can't see it, so he can't attain certainty. What does he have to do in this case? Go back to what? غلبة الظن. In this case, he has to act by his overwhelming suspicion. Once he feels there's an overwhelming suspicion that Fajr time is established, then he has to act by it. He has to act by it because he can't. Or for example, it's cloudy. If it's cloudy, can you attain yaqeen? Can you reach yaqeen? Whether it's sunrise or whether it's Fajr or sunset. Can you, because yaqeen in this case is not attainable, can you act by ghalabat al-dhann? Yes, you have to in this case. You have to act by your overwhelming suspicion. And that's why if someone has doubts whether a prayer time has entered, is he allowed to pray? If he's doubtful whether the time is entered. I'm not sure it's Fajr time or not. Can he pray? No. He can't act off of his doubt and hesitation. If he has overwhelming suspicion that it's Fajr time has entered, can he pray? Yes, he can. And this is all of the other prayers, because in the prayer is established either by yaqeen or by overwhelming suspicion. If yaqeen, an example of yaqeen would be if you see the actual sun going below the horizon. That's what? That's yaqeen. If it's cloudy, you can't see it, you have to then act by overwhelming suspicion. And that's, like I said, in many cases. So, if it's permissible to pray based on overwhelming suspicion, then how can we say that you are not obligated to withhold? So if it's permissible to pray based on overwhelming suspicion that the time has entered, then it must be the case that you have to withhold from eating and drinking and all of the mufattirat based on that. Okay? And so, what? That fourth case, what is correct? You have to withhold. It's wajib. It's wajib. قال رحمه الله: وهل يقيد هذا فيما إذا لم يتبين أنه أكل بعد طلوع الفجر؟ قال رحمه الله: الراجح أنه لا يقيد حتى لو تبين له بعد ذلك أن الفجر قد طلع فصومه صحيح بناء على العذر بالجهل في الحال. حتى لو تبين له بعد ذلك أن الفجر قد طلع فصومه صحيح بناء على العذر بالجهل في الحال. قال: وأما على المذهب وهو قول الجمهور، أما على المذهب فإذا تبين أن أكله كان بعد طلوع الفجر فعليه القضاء بناء على أنه لا يعذر بالجهل. هذا كما قلنا قول أكثر الفقهاء. والصواب، قال الشيخ: والصواب أنه لا قضاء عليه ولو تبين له أنه بعد الصبح. وهذا رأي شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية كذلك، لأنه كان جاهلا ولأن الله أذن له أن يأكل حتى يتبين. ومن القواعد الفقهية المقررة أن ما ترتب على المأذون فليس بمضمون، أي ليس له حكم لأنه مأذون فيه. فالخلاصة أنه له أن يأكل ويشرب إذا كان مترددا في طلوع الفجر، له أن يأكل ويشرب، وصومه صحيح، صح صومه إذا كان مترددا شاكا في طلوع الفجر. لكن لو أكل بناء على شكه ثم تبين له أن الفجر كان قد طلع، بمعنى أنه تبين أنه أكل بعد الفجر، فهل يجب عليه أن يقضي ذلك اليوم أم لا؟ الذي رجحه الشيخ هنا الشيخ ابن عثيمين، وهو رأي شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية ومذهب الظاهرية، أنه لا يجب عليه القضاء، لا يجب عليه القضاء. وجمهور العلماء المذاهب الفقهية الأربعة، حنفية، مالكية، الشافعية والحنابلة، يقولون يجب عليه في هذه الصورة أن يقضي، يلزمه القضاء، يقولون يلزمه القضاء. Now, we mentioned that are you obligated to withhold from eating and drinking if you're doubtful if it's Fajr time yet or not? Is it Fajr time? You're doubtful. Are you required to withhold? No, you're hesitant. You're hesitant. 50-50. So, if it turns out, you eat in that case, and it turns out that you had eaten after Fajr. You were doubtful about Fajr, shak. Now you weren't obligated to withhold, so you ate and drank or whatever. But it turned out later that when you ate, it was actually after Fajr time. Now is he obligated to make it up or not? The madhab, the Shaykh says, and it is the opinion of the Jumhur, is that if it turns out that he had eaten after Fajr, then he has to make it up. This is the madhab and the opinion of the Jumhur. Now, because he's not excused due to that ignorance of the situation. The Shaykh says, and what is correct is that he's not obligated to make it up, even if it becomes clear later that it was actually Fajr time when he ate and drank, because he was ignorant. And he said, because Allah gave him permission to eat in this case. And so, one of the fiqhi qawa'id is that whatever is a result of something which is permissible has no ruling, right? Was he allowed to eat in that case? He was allowed. They said, well, since he was allowed, then he can't be, he's excused then if it turned out that he ate after. So the summary on this issue is that if he eats and drinks based on hesitation and doubtfulness whether it's Fajr or not, and we said that it's permissible for him to eat in this case, right? Because he still hasn't verified Fajr time. And so he ate based on that. Just because of that doubt, he said, I'm just going to base it on what I'm in, and that is that it is still nighttime. He ate and drank, and then it turned out I actually ate after Fajr. When I was eating, it was actually Fajr time. Does he have to make up that day or not? Does he have to make up that day? What the Shaykh rahimahullah holds, this is what he held here, and it is the opinion of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, and it is the madhab of al-Zahiriyyah, is that in this case he does not have to make it up. He does not have to make it up. The majority of the ulama, and that includes the four madahib, this includes the four madahib, the majority say that in this case he has to make up that day. He has to make up that day because he ate after Fajr. ثم قال الحجاوي رحمه الله: لا إن أكل شاكا في غروب الشمس. لا إن أكل شاكا في غروب الشمس. قال الشيخ رحمه الله: قوله لا إن أكل شاكا في غروب الشمس أي فلا يصح صومه، لأن الله يقول: ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل، فلا بد أن يتم إلى الليل. ولقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إذا أقبل الليل من هاهنا، أشار بيده إلى الشرق، وأدبر النهار من ها هنا وأشار إلى المغرب وغربت الشمس فلا بد أن تغرب الشمس فقد أفطر الصائم. فمن أكل شاكا في طلوع الفجر هل يصح صومه أم لا؟ من أكل شاكا في طلوع الفجر صحيح، صومه صحيح. قال لا إن أكل شاكا في غروب الشمس، لا إن أكل شاكا في غروب الشمس. قال والفرق بين من أكل شاكا في طلوع الفجر ومن أكل شاكا في غروب الشمس أن الأول بان على أصل وهو بقاء الليل، والثاني أيضا بان على أصل وهو بقاء النهار، فلا يجوز أن يأكل مع الشك في غروب الشمس، وعليه القضاء ما لم نعلم أنه أكل بعد غروب الشمس، وعليه القضاء ما لم نعلم أنه أكل بعد غروب الشمس. فإن علمنا أن أكله كان بعد الغروب فلا قضاء عليه، ولكن عليه الإثم. لماذا؟ لأنه لا يجوز أن يفطر بناء على الشك. قال ويجوز أن يأكل إذا تيقن أو غلب على ظنه أن الشمس قد غربت، حتى على المذهب إذا غلب على ظنه أن الشمس قد غربت فله أن يفطر ولا قضاء عليه ما لم يتبين أنها لم تغرب. Al-Hajjawi says, not if he eats while doubtful about sunset. Not if he eats while doubtful about sunset. So the first case, initially when he said, if someone eats and he's doubtful about Fajr, doubtful, is it still nighttime and has Fajr entered? In that case, fasting correct or not correct? Correct. He says, not if he eats while doubtful about sunset. Meaning, he's doubtful, did the sun set or not? Check. And so he broke his fast. The Shaykh says, meaning his fasting is not correct. Because Allah said, ثُمَّ أَتِمُّوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ, and then complete your fast until night. And due to the statement of the Messenger ﷺ, if night comes from here, and he pointed towards the east, and the day leaves from here, and he pointed towards the west, and the sun has set, and so it's a must then that the sun sets, and the sun has set, then the fasting person has broke their fast. So what's the difference between someone who did that doubtfully regarding Fajr, his fasting is correct, and someone who did it doubtfully regarding sunset, his fasting is not correct? Ahsan. So the one who's doubtful about sunset, is the basis now nighttime or daytime? You guys with me? The basis is what? Daytime. Is that it's daytime. And the one who was doubtful about Fajr, the basis was what? Nighttime. And so, you're not allowed to break your fast merely based on shak, doubt. You're hesitant. Is it nighttime or not? Did the sun set or not? The basis is that we're still in daytime until we verify that we are in nighttime. And so, if he breaks his fast due to that shak regarding sunset, then he has to make up that day if it turns out that he had eaten before sunset. If he had eaten before sunset, then he has to make up that day. طيب, let's say he breaks his fast due to doubt. He's doubtful and he breaks his fast. Now, it turns out that the sun had actually set. What's the ruling in this case? If he broke his fast due to doubt, he's doubtful about sunset, broke his fast, it actually turned out that the sun had set. What's the ruling? His fasting is correct, but he's sinful. His fasting is correct, but he is sinful. Why is he sinful? Because he broke his fast due to shak. You can't break your fast due to shak. So when can you break your fast? If you're sure or غلبة ظن. If you are, the Sheikh says, it's permissible to eat if you are sure or you have overwhelming suspicion that the sun has set. He said, even according to the madhab, if you have overwhelming suspicion that the sun had set, then you are allowed to break your fast and you don't have to make it up if it's not clear whether the sun had set or not. So you break your fast, what? If you're sure or overwhelming suspicion. When do you have to withhold? Withhold. If you're sure that Fajr has entered or you have overwhelming suspicion that Fajr time has entered. قال الشيخ مسألة إن أكل ظانا أن الشمس غربت ولم يتبين الأمر فصومه صحيح وهذا يؤخذ من قول المؤلف شاكا في غروب الشمس فعلم منه أنه لو أكل وقد ظن أن الشمس قد غربت فإنه يصح صومه ما لم يتبين أنها لم تغرب فإن تبين أنها لم تغرب فالصحيح أنه لا قضاء عليه والمذهب أن عليه القضاء وهو قول جمهور العلماء. المذاهب الأربعة أي من غلب على ظنه أن الشمس غربت فأفطر ثم تبين أنها لم تغرب هل يقضي أم لا؟ إذا تبين أنها لم تغرب وأفطر بناء على غلبة الظن الجمهور على أنه ماذا؟ يقضي والشيخ رحمه الله يرجح وهو قول شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية أنه لا يجب عليه أن يقضي أنه لا يلزمه القضاء. إذن الأحوال الثلاثة فيما يتعلق بمن أفطر بناء على غلبة الظن أن يغلب على ظنه أن الشمس غربت ثم تبين أنها غربت فصومه صحيح لا إشكال. الحالة الثانية أن يغلب على ظنه أن الشمس غربت ثم لا يتبين له شيء لم يتبين غربت أم لم تغرب فصومه صحيح كذلك الحالة الثالثة أن يغلب على ظنه أن الشمس غربت ثم يتبين أنها لم تغرب ففي هذا خلاف هو الخلاف الذي أشرنا إليه. So the Sheikh says, مسألة. If he eats thinking that the sun had set, overwhelming suspicion that the sun had set, and nothing becomes clear after that. You know, you're not able to differentiate, well, did I eat while the sun was out or if the sun had really set at that time while I was eating? It's unclear. Then his fasting is correct. He broke his fast due to overwhelming suspicion, and you weren't able to later find out, did we break our fast after sunset or before sunset? The fasting is valid. He says, and this is taken from the statement of the author, شاكا في غروب الشمس. طيب. Now, if he breaks his fast due to overwhelming suspicion that the sun had set, and then it becomes clear that it hadn't set, Okay? The madhab is that he makes it up. And it is the statement of the majority of the ulama. Okay? Someone breaks their fast due to overwhelming suspicion that the sun had set. It becomes clear, look, the clouds move, the sun is actually out. Do they have to make up their fast or not? The Jumhur say that he has to make it up. The Shaykh rahimahullah, and it is the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah, is the minority position, is that he doesn't have to make it up. He doesn't have to make it up. So there's three cases then as it relates to overwhelming suspicion. Someone overwhelmingly suspects that the sun had set, and then it becomes clear that the sun had actually set. They break their fast, and then it becomes clear that the sun had actually set. What's the ruling? Sawm is sahih. That issue is clear. Someone overwhelmingly suspects that the sun had set, and they break their fast, and then nothing becomes clear. They don't know when they broke their fast exactly. Fasting is also correct. Now, someone, which is the case we mentioned, suspects that the sun had set and breaks their fast, and then it turns out that the sun hadn't set. What is the correct position? Now, this is the issue of differing that we pointed to. The majority say if it turns out that they had broken their fast before sunset, they have to make it up. Shaykh Umar al-Uthaymeen, and it was also previous to Ibn Taymiyyah and a group, they said that what? You don't have to make it up. So that's as it relates to overwhelming suspicion. Who can give us the three cases as it relates to shak? And then I'll know that you actually understood. Iftar according to shak. Let's mention the three cases. He is doubtful whether the sun set or not. And he broke his fast, and it turns out that the sun had actually set. His fasting is correct, and he is sinful. Now, if he has doubts whether the sun set, and then he broke his fast, and it turns out that the sun had not set, then he is sinful and he has to make it up. The final case is that he is doubtful whether the sun set, and so he broke his fast, and it wasn't clear whether it's set or not. Then his fasting it's incorrect, no khilaf. Why? Because the basis is that it is daytime. So these final two that I mentioned, there is no khilaf that his fasting is incorrect. Maybe if you guys make a table of this, you guys go back to the audio and listen to it and try to make a table. قال الحجاوي رحمه الله أو قال الشيخ عثيمين رحمه الله فإن قال قائل ما الدليل على أنه يجوز الفطر بالظن مع أن الأصل بقاء النهار؟ فالجواب حديث أسماء بنت أبي بكر رضي الله عنهما قالت أفطرنا في يوم غيم على عهد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وإفطارهم بناء على ظن قطعا لقولها في هذا الحديث ثم طلعت الشمس فدل ذلك على أنه يجوز أن يفطر بظن الغروب ثم إن تبين أن الشمس غربت فالأمر واضح أو لم يتبين شيء فالأمر أيضا واضح وإن تبين أنها لم تغرب وجب القضاء على المذهب بل على المذاهب الأربعة وعلى القول الراجح لا يجب القضاء. He says, and if so, someone says, what is the evidence that you can break your fast due to overwhelming suspicion? Hadith Asma bint Abi Bakr. He says, the answer is the hadith of Asma bint Abi Bakr radiyallahu anhum. She said, we broke our fast on a cloudy day in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so you break your fast on a cloudy day. Is that yaqeen or is that ghalabat dhann? Ghalabat dhann. And that's why she said, and then the sun came out. And then the sun appeared. He said, so this shows that you can break your fast if you suspect that the sun has set. Now, if it turns out that the sun had actually set, the issue is clear. And if nothing turns out to be clear, there's no decisive, it's not decisive, then the issue is also clear. However, if it turns out that it hadn't set, then you have to make it up according to the Jumhur. And he says the correct position to him, to the Shaykh, is that you don't have to make it up in that case. You don't have to make it. And this is something you get so many questions about. Yeah, I broke my fast, I thought it was iftar time. I thought it was a iftar time. I was looking at all these issues. And similarly, I thought it was still nighttime and I was having suhoor. I thought it was still nighttime and I was having suhoor. A lot. So if you get these down, then you'll understand these types of questions. قال مسألة رجل غابت عليه الشمس وهو في الأرض وأفطر وطارت به الطائرة ثم رأى الشمس. نقول لا يلزم أن يمسك لأن النهار في حقه انتهى والشمس لم تطلع عليه بل هو طلع عليها. لكن لو أنها لم تغب وبقي 5 دقائق ثم طارت الطائرة ولما ارتفعت إذ الشمس باق عليها ربع ساعة أو ثلث فإن صيامه يبقى لأنه ما زال عليه صوم. ما زال عليه. طيب مسألة. If someone breaks their fast while he is on earth because of sunset, the sun had set, and then he takes off in a plane, and then he's able to see the sun again, what does he do? He was on earth and he saw the sunset, he broke his fast. And then he took off, and then they're able to see the sun again. They elevated and they saw the sun again. Does he have to withhold or not? He says he is not required to withhold because his day had ended. He broke his fast correctly, and the sun didn't appear, but rather he went up to it. And then this is like, so for example, if someone was, just theoretically, I don't know if it's possible, if someone was at the bottom of a skyscraper and he's seeing the sun and it's set in his eyes, he broke his fast. And he took the elevator all the way to the top floor and he sees the sun again. Does he have to withhold? No, because he broke his fast correctly. He said, however, if there was a little bit left for the sun to set, little bit left, and then they took off, like let's say there was 5 minutes left for sunset, and then they took off in the plane, and this happens a lot, and you're going towards the sun. Now instead of 5 minutes being left, there's an hour left for iftar. What do you have to do in that case? You have to withhold until the sun sets in your eyes. And you have to withhold. Some people have a misconception. You think if let's say they took off from where? Jawad, Pakistan? They take off from Pakistan. And they see the sun. The sun hadn't set, and they go and they're flying and they're going with the sun. It's iftar time now in Pakistan, back in Pakistan. Can they break their fast based on the country they flew from? No, and that's what a lot of people do. They think like, it's iftar time back home, let's break our fast. No, your ruling now is you see the sun, you have to wait for it to set. طيب, last paragraph, last page. قوله أو معتقدا أنه ليل فبان نهارا أو معتقدا أنه ليل فبان نهارا أي لو أكل يعتقد أنه في ليل فبان نهارا لم يصح صومه سواء من أول غلب على ظنه أنه في ليل ثم تبين أنه أكل في النهار قال فبان نهار لم يصح صومه سواء من أول النهار أو آخره أكل يعتقد أنه ليل بناء على ظنه أو بناء على الأصل بان نهارا فعليه القضاء. فالفقهاء رحمهم الله لا يعذرون بالجهل ويقولون العبرة بالواقع، والعبرة بالواقع. مثاله: أكل السحور يعتقد أن الفجر لم يطلع فتبين أنه طالع، فالمذهب يجب عليه القضاء، وهو قول أكثر العلماء. قال: وهذا يقع كثيرا، يقوم الإنسان من فراشه ويقرب سحوره ويأكل ويشرب، وإذا بالصلاة تقام فيكون قد أكل في النهار، فعليه القضاء على المذهب. والقول الراجح أنه لا قضاء عليه وسبق دليله. Or, the Shaykh Hajjawi says, or eats believing that it is nighttime and it turns out to be daytime. Or eats believing that it is nighttime and it turns out to be daytime. Meaning, according to them, they say the fasting is not correct. The fasting is not correct. So the fuqaha rahimahullah, they don't excuse the person due to their ignorance in that case. He ate while it was daytime, khalas, he has to make up that fast. That's what they say. And this is what most of them say. Most of them say. He says, for example, someone has suhoor and he believes that Fajr time has not entered. And then it becomes clear that Fajr time had entered. So the madhab, and it is the opinion of the Jumhur, that he has to make it up. He says, and this happens a lot, that a person gets up and they think that it's still nighttime and they're having their suhoor, and then it turns out that it was actually past Fajr time. And so he has to make it up according to the Jumhur, and it is the madhab of the Hanabila. And he says, the Shaykh says, according to the correct position, is that he does not have to make it up, and the evidences have proceeded. The evidences have proceeded. طيب, as it relates to Fajr time, let's do what we did. If you have an overwhelming suspicion that it is Fajr time, what is the ruling in this case? Overwhelming suspicion that it is Fajr time, what is the ruling? It's an obligation to withhold. Now, if you have shak, or if you have shak, whether it's Fajr time or not, is it Fajr or is it night? You have shak, or you have an overwhelming suspicion that it is night time and that Fajr has not appeared, then if you eat in that case and it turns out that Fajr had not appeared, what is the ruling? There's nothing upon you. Fasting is correct, and that's clear. If you eat in that case and it turns out that Fajr time had appeared, then Jumhur, the vast majority, say you have to make it up. And Ibn Taymiyyah and a minority said that you don't have to make it up. You made a mistake. رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. That's what they say. It was a mistake. And then the third and final case is that if you eat out of shak or overwhelming suspicion that it's still nighttime, shak, or overwhelming the suspicion that it's still nighttime, and the issue wasn't clear, neither became clear, then is the fasting correct or incorrect? Why? Now, the fasting is correct because the basis is that it is nighttime. This is the opposite of when the sun sets, because the basis is that it is daytime. The basis is that it is daytime. قال رحمه الله: وكذلك إذا أكل يعتقد أن الشمس غربت ثم تبين أنها لم تغرب فهو أكل يعتقد أنه في ليل فبان أنه في نهار فيلزمه على المذهب القضاء وعلى القول الراجح لا يلزمه. ودليله حديث أسماء السابق حيث لم يأمرهم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بالقضاء، وهذا دليل خاص. ومن الأدلة العامة قوله تعالى ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. إذن الفرق بين أول النهار وآخره أنه يجوز في أول النهار الأكل مع الشك، وفي آخر النهار لا يجوز الأكل مع الشك، وهذا كله سبق. He says, similarly, if someone eats thinking that the sun had set, suspicion that the sun had set, believing that the sun had set, and then it turns out that it hadn't set, what is the ruling? Jumhur say, make it up. And Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah's opinion of Ibn Uthaymeen is that what? That you don't have to make it up. The proof? Hadith of Asma. So the Shaykh says, your fasting is correct in all three cases, as it relates to breaking your fast, thinking that the sun had set. All three cases, your fasting is correct if you break your fast thinking that the sun had set. And he says the evidence is the hadith of Asma and the statement of Allah, قوله تعالى ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. So what's the difference between the beginning of the day and the end of the day? Is that it's permissible to eat with shak as it relates to Fajr time, as it relates to the beginning of the day, because the basis is that it's nighttime. And it's not permissible to eat due to shak at the end of the day, because the basis is that it is daytime. قال مسألة الناس الذين على الجبال أو السهول والعمارات الشاهقة كل منهم له حكمه، فمن غابت عنه الشمس حل له الفطر ومن لا فلا. نعم، فلا يجوز لمن كان في مكان مرتفع أن يفطر مع أهل الأرض، لأن الشمس يتأخر غروبها عمن كان في مكان مرتفع. He says مسألة. Now people who live in mountains or in valleys or in tall buildings, each person has their own ruling. Each group has their own ruling. And so if the sun sets to them, for them, they can break their fast. And if not, then no. For example, if some people, let's say some people are at the top of a skyscraper and there's people on the floor. The people on the floor now have broken their fast because they can't see the sun anymore. Can the people at the top break their fast? No, not until the sun sets to them. And this is one of the problems with these timings. They don't take these things into consideration. Khalas, you're in Chicago, what's it, 7 whatever. Doesn't matter if you're 1,000 feet or if you're 500 feet below sea level. It's all and there is a difference. There is a difference. على كل حال, so each group has their own ruling. And you can break your fast if it's yaqeen or غلبت ظن. نعم. نقف هنا وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.